The orphanage had always been a place of quiet routines, where children moved from one activity to another under the watchful eyes of the caretakers. It was not a grand building, just a few old brick walls and narrow hallways, but it was home for the children who had no one else. Most days were filled with small joys and little adventures, though the laughter often came with an undercurrent of sadness because everyone knew these children had been abandoned or lost their families. Among the children, there was a boy who was quieter than most. He moved through the rooms unnoticed, blending in with the background, and yet, there was a deep spark in his eyes that no one seemed to notice. He watched others with a quiet curiosity, rarely speaking up, and carried a small notebook filled with scribbled music notes that he had copied from old magazines and radio programs. That morning, the orphanage was buzzing more than usual. News had spread that a famous CEO was visiting, a man whose name everyone recognized from newspapers and television. He was known for his wealth and for being unpredictable, sometimes even eccentric in his actions. The children whispered among themselves about what he might say or do, some imagining grand gifts, others wondering if he would simply glance and leave. The boy stayed in the back, keeping his distance, unsure what to expect from someone so important and so different from the quiet, familiar faces of the orphanage staff. When the CEO arrived, the atmosphere changed completely. The sound of his car engine, the clicking of his shoes on the pavement, and the confident way he moved through the orphanage made everyone sit up straight. He wore a sharp suit, and his eyes sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. He greeted the children with a booming voice that made some of them jump, and his laughter seemed to fill the entire building. He talked to the staff, asked questions about the children's daily routines, and showed genuine interest in their lives, though always with a hint of playful exaggeration. He was the kind of person who could command attention without even trying, and today he had chosen this small orphanage for his visit. After some time, he turned to the children and, with a mischievous grin, declared, "If anyone here can play the piano well, I will adopt them myself." There was a pause as the children processed his words. Some laughed nervously, unsure if he was serious. Others whispered to each other, imagining what it would be like to be taken away by such a famous man. The boy in the back felt his heart skip a beat. He had always loved the piano, even though he had never played in front of anyone. The orphanage had an old, slightly worn piano in the corner of the common room, and he had practiced quietly when no one was looking. The thought that someone as important as the CEO might notice his music made him feel a strange mixture of fear and hope. The CEO noticed the hesitation and the whispers, and he laughed again, a sound that was both warm and teasing. "I am serious," he said, though his eyes twinkled as if he were sharing a secret joke. "Anyone who can play for me today might just change their life." The children exchanged glances, some doubtful, some excited. The caretakers tried to encourage them, but they knew how shy and reserved some of the children were. The boy watched from a corner, his fingers instinctively tapping against his leg, as he imagined the possibility of playing the piano for this man. He had practiced every day, sometimes late into the night, using scraps of sheet music and whatever melodies he could remember from the radio. Music had always been his escape, a place where he could feel free and expressive, even when the world seemed indifferent. As the children started moving toward the piano, some to play and some just out of curiosity, the boy felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. He was not sure if he was ready to be seen, to let someone as important as the CEO hear the music that lived inside him. He stayed back for a moment, watching as other children fumbled through simple tunes, some confident and others hesitant. The CEO clapped and laughed, clearly enjoying the variety of attempts. Each child's effort seemed to entertain him, but none of them managed to capture the depth and emotion that music could truly hold. The boy felt the old piano calling to him, as if it understood him, as if it had been waiting for this very moment. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the nervous tremor in his hands. He walked slowly toward the piano, his footsteps almost silent on the worn wooden floor. The room seemed to hold its breath, the chatter fading into a quiet anticipation. The other children noticed him too late, and some gasped softly, surprised that he had decided to step forward. The CEO's eyes shifted toward the boy, a look of curiosity replacing his playful amusement. He leaned forward slightly, as if sensing that something unusual was about to happen. The boy's hands hovered over the keys for a moment, feeling the cool surface beneath his fingertips. Memories of secret practice sessions, of late nights filled with imaginary audiences, came rushing back. He closed his eyes for a brief second, gathering courage, and then pressed the first key. The sound was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it was clear that it was not ordinary. The boy's fingers moved carefully but confidently, producing notes that were delicate and precise, carrying emotion beyond his years. The melody started slowly, each note weaving a story of longing, hope, and quiet determination. The room seemed to transform. The laughter and whispers vanished, replaced by an attentive silence. The CEO leaned back slightly, intrigued, his eyebrows raised, and the caretakers exchanged amazed looks. Even the other children stopped their own playing or fidgeting, captivated by the music that seemed to fill every corner of the room. The boy played as if the piano were speaking for him, expressing all the feelings he had kept hidden for so long. As he continued, the music grew stronger, more confident, yet remained tender and heartfelt. The CEO's laughter had disappeared entirely, replaced by a thoughtful gaze. He watched the boy closely, noticing the passion and dedication in his performance. It was not just the technical skill that impressed him, but the emotion behind it, the story that the music told without words. The boy's heart raced, but he continued to play, encouraged by the rare attention and recognition. For the first time, he felt seen, understood in a way that no one had ever noticed before. When the last note lingered and finally faded, the room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone were suspended in awe. Then, the CEO slowly clapped, softly at first, then more enthusiastically. His face was lit with genuine admiration, and for the first time, the boy realized that his music had truly reached someone. The other children started clapping too, some cheerfully, some in astonished respect, but the boy could hardly hear them over the thudding of his own heart. He looked up at the CEO, unsure what expression he would see. The man smiled warmly, not with the teasing amusement from before, but with a real, heartfelt appreciation. In that moment, the boy felt a spark of hope, a tiny glimmer that his life could change in ways he had never imagined. The CEO walked slowly toward the piano, stopping in front of the boy. He crouched slightly to meet the boy's eyes, his voice calm but sincere. "That was extraordinary," he said. "I have never heard anyone play with such feeling and skill. You have a rare gift." The boy's cheeks flushed, and he nodded, trying to process the unexpected praise. The other children watched with wide eyes, some whispering among themselves about how impressive the boy had been. For the first time, the boy felt proud, not just for playing well, but for showing a part of himself that had always been hidden. That moment marked the beginning of something new, though neither he nor anyone else could fully understand what it might become. After the CEO had left the room to speak with the staff, the boy returned to his small corner in the orphanage, his hands still tingling from the notes he had played. He could hardly believe what had just happened. The words of praise from someone so important echoed in his mind, making him feel both proud and nervous. He knew that playing the piano was no longer just a private escape. It had become something real, something that could change his life. But he also knew he had to prepare, because the attention he had caught would not fade overnight. The boy spent the rest of the day in a quiet mixture of excitement and fear. He wandered through the orphanage hallways, trying to act normal, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the piano, the way the keys had felt under his fingers, and the melody that had flowed from his heart. For the first time, he realized that music was more than just a hobby. It was a bridge between who he was and the world outside the orphanage, a language that could communicate feelings without words. He wanted to become better, to prove that he could do more than just play a single song well. That evening, after the children had gone to their rooms and the caretakers were busy tidying up, the boy returned to the piano alone. The orphanage had an old room where the piano was kept, slightly out of the main activity areas. Dust covered parts of it, and some keys were chipped, but it was the only instrument available. He ran his fingers across the keys, feeling the familiar uneven texture, and closed his eyes. He began playing softly, almost whispering the notes to himself. Each melody was a story, a memory of the small joys and struggles of his life at the orphanage. He thought about the laughter of children, the gentle scolding of the caretakers, and the emptiness of not having a family to return to. The music was a way to hold onto all these feelings, to give them shape and meaning. He had been practicing for years, mostly in secret. He had no teacher, no guidance except for what he could learn from magazines, radio shows, and his own attempts. Some days he succeeded, and some days he struggled, but he never stopped trying. The piano was a friend and a mentor in one. It never judged him, never doubted him, and always responded to his persistence with the possibility of music. Tonight, as he practiced, he focused on improving a particular piece that he had heard on the radio recently, a complex melody that demanded precision and emotion. He repeated it over and over, correcting mistakes, learning to move his fingers with more speed and accuracy. With every attempt, he could feel himself growing, not just as a musician, but as a person who could face challenges. The boy's mind kept returning to the CEO's words. The idea of being adopted had seemed impossible when he first heard it, a joke that belonged to a world he could not reach. But after playing and receiving that rare compliment, the thought no longer felt so distant. He could imagine a life beyond the orphanage, where he could practice music without the old squeaky piano, where he could explore his talent freely. Yet the thought was also frightening. He had no idea what life with someone so powerful and wealthy would be like. Would he fit in? Would he be able to adjust? The uncertainty made him anxious, but it also fueled his determination to be ready for whatever might come. Over the next few days, the boy became more focused than ever. Each morning, he would rise early, before the other children woke, and sneak into the music room. He practiced with care, refining his technique, and experimenting with new melodies. He learned to listen to the sound he produced, adjusting his fingers and posture to get the best possible tone. He discovered that music was not just about playing notes but about telling a story, about expressing feelings that could touch others deeply. Every note became a conversation with himself and, perhaps one day, with the world beyond the orphanage walls. The caretakers noticed a subtle change in the boy. He seemed more confident, though he still remained quiet and humble. When they passed by and asked what he was doing, he would shrug or mumble that he was just practicing, not revealing how important this practice had become to him. Some of the other children watched him curiously. They had never seen him so dedicated, and a few even started sneaking into the room to hear him play from a distance. The melodies that flowed from his fingers were so beautiful that they could not help but pause and listen, even if they did not understand how someone so quiet could create such music. The boy, however, remained focused on his own journey, aware that every day of practice was a step towards something greater. The orphanage continued its usual routines, but the boy's world had quietly shifted. He now measured his days not just by chores or meals, but by how much he could play, how much he could improve. Each session at the piano was a private triumph, a chance to explore his talent and refine it to its fullest. He began experimenting with complex chords, varying the rhythm, and adding emotion to each note. Sometimes he would play fast, full of energy and excitement. Other times, he would play softly, with sadness or longing, pouring every feeling he had into the instrument. Music had become his language, his way of coping with loneliness, and his path toward the possibility of a different life. As the days passed, rumors about the CEO's challenge spread through the orphanage. Some children wondered if he really meant what he said, and some dismissed it as a joke that would soon be forgotten. The boy did not pay attention to the whispers. He focused solely on his music, knowing that skill and passion were what mattered most. Yet, in quiet moments, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of being chosen, of leaving the orphanage and experiencing a world he had only dreamed of. He pictured himself practicing on a grand piano in a bright room, learning new pieces, and sharing his music with someone who truly understood its value. These thoughts filled him with both excitement and a deep sense of responsibility to prepare himself for that future. One afternoon, As the boy practiced a particularly difficult piece, the caretaker who oversaw the music room came in quietly. She had noticed the boy's dedication and could see how much talent he possessed. She did not say much but simply watched, smiling softly, recognizing that this boy had a gift that needed nurturing. She left him to continue, understanding that encouragement sometimes came from allowing someone to explore their potential without interruption. The boy, unaware that he was being observed, played with a sense of freedom, letting his imagination guide his fingers. The music filled the room with warmth and life, turning the quiet orphanage into a space of creativity and hope. As evening fell, the boy reluctantly stopped playing, stretching his tired fingers. He felt a mixture of pride and anticipation, knowing that each practice session brought him closer to the possibility of a life-changing opportunity. He made a silent promise to himself to continue, to push past fear and doubt, and to play with all the passion and skill he could muster. He knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that music had the power to open doors that otherwise might remain closed. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a guide toward a future that was slowly beginning to feel within reach. That night, as he lay in his small bed, the boy thought about the CEO's words once again. He could almost hear the laughter that had accompanied the challenge, but now it seemed different, almost like a seed planted in his mind that was beginning to grow. He imagined walking into the orphanage common room, sitting at the piano with confidence, and playing music that would leave everyone in awe. The thought filled him with determination. He knew that he had to be ready, that he had to show not just talent, but courage, dedication, and the story behind his music. And with that resolve, he drifted into sleep, dreaming of melodies, of possibilities, and of a life that might finally embrace him for who he truly was. The day of the performance arrived, and the orphanage buzzed with nervous excitement. The children whispered to each other, wondering who would be brave enough to play for the CEO again. The boy felt a mixture of anticipation and fear as he approached the common room where the piano sat, waiting like an old friend. He had spent countless hours practicing, refining every melody, every chord, until the music flowed naturally from his fingers. Now it was time to show what he could do, and the thought made his heart pound. The CEO entered the room first, as he often did, his presence commanding attention without effort. He greeted the children warmly, smiling at their eager faces, and turned his eyes toward the boy. The boy noticed the look in the CEO's eyes, a mixture of curiosity, expectation, and amusement. It reminded him of the first day he had seen the man, when the challenge had been issued almost as a joke. Now, however, it felt real, and the boy understood that this moment could change everything. Other children were encouraged to play, and a few tried to perform simple tunes. The CEO watched politely, clapping at the effort, but none of the performances captured the depth and feeling that he had hoped for. When it was the boy's turn, he stepped forward quietly, his fingers brushing against the keys. The room fell silent, and for a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of anticipation. The boy took a deep breath, remembering all the nights he had spent practicing alone, the melodies he had imagined, and the emotions he wanted to convey. He closed his eyes, letting the piano guide his hands. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but as he continued, confidence grew. Each key spoke with clarity and emotion, telling a story of hope, struggle, and resilience. The melody filled the room, wrapping around every listener with an unexpected warmth. The children stopped whispering, captivated by the sound, and the caretakers watched in silent awe. The CEO leaned forward slightly, his expression changing from amusement to focused attention. He could see not just skill, but heart, determination, and courage in the boy's playing. The music was alive, and it carried a message that words could not express. As the boy played, he allowed himself to be fully present in the music. He remembered the quiet evenings at the piano, the hours of practice, and the moments when he had doubted himself. Those memories fueled his performance, making each note more expressive, more meaningful. He played with a fluidity that came from years of dedication, blending technical skill with emotion. The melody rose and fell, soft and loud, fast and slow, like waves moving across a vast ocean. The audience could feel the story behind every note, the journey of a boy who had faced loneliness but refused to let it define him. The CEO's eyes softened, and for the first time, his playful smile disappeared. He watched the boy with genuine admiration, realizing that he was witnessing something rare and extraordinary. The boy's hands moved across the keys with precision and grace, producing music that was both powerful and delicate. The melody was complex, yet it felt natural, as if it had always belonged to the boy's heart. Even the other children, some of whom had never cared much for music, found themselves drawn in, mesmerized by the talent and the emotion that filled the room. Time seemed to stretch as the boy continued to play. The room was quiet except for the piano, each note resonating in the hearts of those listening. The boy felt a sense of freedom and connection, as if the piano were an extension of his own voice. He did not notice the minutes passing. All that existed was the music, the story it told, and the audience that had been captivated by it. The CEO remained in his seat, unable to look away, fully absorbed in the performance. He had seen many talented people in his life, but there was something different here. A raw, unfiltered expression of emotion that demanded attention and respect. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the room seemed to hold its breath for a heartbeat. Then the CEO clapped, softly at first, then more vigorously, his eyes shining with admiration. The other children joined in, their applause a mix of excitement and awe. The boy opened his eyes, breathing heavily, his heart racing with a mix of relief and pride. He had done it. He had shared a part of himself that had always been private, and it had been heard, truly heard, by someone who mattered. The CEO approached the boy, his expression both thoughtful and warm. He knelt slightly to meet the boy's gaze, speaking with a sincerity that made the boy feel seen in a way he never had before. "That was extraordinary," he said. "You have a rare gift, not just in skill, but in the way you play from your heart. You should be proud of yourself." The boy nodded, unable to speak at first, overwhelmed by the praise. The CEO continued, explaining that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, dedication, and the ability to express oneself that made someone truly remarkable. The boy listened intently, realizing that his private hours of practice had prepared him for this moment, and that his persistence had finally been recognized. The caretakers looked on, some with tears in their eyes, witnessing a transformation in the boy. He had always been quiet and reserved, but now he stood with a newfound confidence. The children around him whispered excitedly, inspired by what they had just heard. They had seen someone from their own world achieve something extraordinary, and it gave them hope that they too could accomplish more than they imagined. After the applause died down, the CEO invited the boy to speak about his music. The boy hesitated, unsure if he had words to express what he felt, but he managed to explain that he had always loved the piano, that it had been his companion and guide. He spoke about the practice, the joy, and the way music had helped him cope with challenges. The CEO listened with genuine interest, nodding and asking questions that showed he valued the boy's experience. The room was filled with a sense of connection, a bridge between two worlds that had rarely met before. That day, the boy learned something important, that talent combined with courage could open doors that had once seemed impossible. He realized that the piano was more than just an instrument. It was a way to communicate, to inspire, and to create change. The CEO, for his part, saw not just potential but character. A boy who had faced hardship but remained dedicated, humble, and true to himself. It was a rare combination, one that could not be taught, only nurtured and recognized. As the day ended and the CEO prepared to leave, he spoke privately with the boy, promising to consider how he could support his growth and development. The boy left the common room with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. He knew that life might never be the same again. The piano had been his secret, his comfort, and his companion, but now it had become the key to a future filled with possibilities. He carried that feeling in his heart, a mixture of pride, hope, and determination, knowing that his journey had only just begun. After the boy's performance, The CEO sat in quiet contemplation, his mind running through the extraordinary display he had just witnessed. He had heard talented musicians before, but this boy was different. The skill, the emotion, the way he played from his heart. It was something rare, something that could not be taught in a school or learned from a book. It was natural, pure, and yet so powerful that it seemed to touch everyone in the room. The CEO leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. He had come expecting amusement, perhaps a few pleasant notes, but what he experienced was far beyond anything he could have imagined. The boy, meanwhile, stood a few steps away from the piano, his chest still rising and falling with the rhythm of the last notes. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. His hands were sore, but the feeling of accomplishment outweighed any fatigue. He had shared something deeply personal, and it had been received with awe and respect. For the first time, he felt truly seen, as though someone understood not just his talent but the effort and determination that lay behind it. He looked at the CEO, wondering what would happen next, feeling both hope and uncertainty. The room was quiet except for the soft murmurs of the other children and the caretakers, who were still recovering from the performance. The CEO's attention, however, was entirely focused on the boy. He considered the words he had spoken when he first visited the orphanage, the playful challenge he had issued almost as a joke. He remembered the laughter that had accompanied it, the disbelief in the eyes of the children, and the certainty that no one could truly impress him. Yet here was a child who had done exactly that. The CEO realized that he could not ignore this moment. It was no longer a question of amusement or curiosity. It was a decision that required careful thought and courage. He began to speak with the orphanage staff, asking questions about the boy's background, his daily life, and his future prospects. He listened intently, absorbing every detail, and noticing the subtle qualities that set this child apart. The boy had not only shown remarkable talent but had also demonstrated humility, patience, and dedication, traits that the CEO knew were rare and valuable. He pondered what it would mean to offer the boy a new life, to provide him with opportunities, guidance, and a home where he could thrive. The idea was both exciting and daunting, but the boy's performance had left a lasting impression that could not be ignored. After speaking with the staff, the CEO turned his attention back to the boy. He walked over slowly, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. His eyes were warm, filled with genuine respect, and the boy felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The CEO's voice was calm but firm, carrying a sense of sincerity that made the boy listen carefully. He explained that what he had seen was more than just talent. It was a combination of passion, courage, and resilience. He told the boy that he wanted to help him develop his abilities, to provide guidance, and perhaps, if the boy was willing, to bring him into his own home where he could continue to grow. The boy's heart raced. He had imagined this moment countless times in his mind, but reality felt different. The idea of leaving the orphanage, of stepping into a life filled with unknowns, was both thrilling and frightening. He thought about the people he would leave behind, the familiar walls and routines, and the friendships he had formed over the years. At the same time, he recognized the opportunity that lay before him. This was a chance to follow his passion fully, to play the piano in ways he had only dreamed of, and to be supported by someone who truly appreciated him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the swirl of emotions inside him. The CEO noticed the boy's hesitation and offered reassurance. He spoke about the importance of trust, the idea that new experiences could be both challenging and rewarding, and that courage often required taking a step into the unknown. The boy listened carefully, his eyes wide, absorbing every word. He realized that this was not a simple decision. It was a turning point, a moment that could shape his life in ways he had never imagined. He felt a sense of determination rising within him, a quiet strength that told him he could face whatever came next. The CEO's encouragement and understanding gave him the confidence to believe in himself, and he nodded slowly, signaling that he was willing to take this leap. The decision was not immediate. The CEO spent time considering how best to approach the situation, understanding that the boy's well-being was paramount. He discussed the matter with his advisors, weighing the practicalities of adoption, the emotional considerations, and the boy's own readiness for such a transition. Every conversation reaffirmed what he already knew. This child was extraordinary, and giving him the opportunity to flourish was not just a choice, but a responsibility. The CEO also thought about the orphanage, the staff who had cared for the boy, and the other children who might look up to him as an example. He wanted to ensure that his decision would be handled with care, respect, and thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, the boy continued to play quietly in the music room, unaware of the discussions taking place about his future. He experimented with new pieces, letting his fingers explore the keys, feeling the music guide him. Each note was a mixture of hope, curiosity, and excitement, reflecting the thoughts that had been growing in his heart. The piano, as always, was a companion, a teacher, and a source of comfort. Yet now, it also symbolized the possibility of change, the bridge to a life that could be filled with opportunities he had never imagined. The boy understood that his dedication, patience, and love for music had brought him to this moment, and he felt a sense of pride that warmed him from the inside. Eventually, the CEO returned to the boy with a clear decision. He knelt again, looking into the boy's eyes with kindness and sincerity. He explained that he wanted to adopt him, not just because of his talent, but because of the courage, dedication, and heart he had shown. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief, and a mixture of joy, fear, and hope washed over him. He realized that the dream he had quietly nurtured for years was now within reach. The CEO spoke gently about the new life that awaited him, the opportunities to learn and grow, and the support he would receive every step of the way. He emphasized that the decision was not only about music, but about believing in the boy's potential and giving him the chance to flourish. The boy felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He had never expected such an outcome, and yet it felt right. He thought about the orphanage, the people he would leave behind, and the friends who had been part of his daily life. At the same time, he recognized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to pursue his passion, to grow, and to be part of a world that had seemed distant and unattainable. He nodded slowly, a mix of emotion and determination on his face, signaling that he was ready to accept the CEO's offer. The CEO smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, and together, they began to discuss the practical steps for this new chapter. The caretakers and staff of the orphanage watched quietly, understanding the significance of the moment. They had seen the boy grow up, watched him develop his talent, and now witnessed the transformation that recognition and opportunity could bring. They offered words of encouragement and support, emphasizing that this decision was about the boy's future and happiness. The other children looked on with admiration, inspired by the courage and perseverance that had brought him to this point. The room was filled with a quiet sense of hope and possibility, a recognition that dreams could indeed come true with dedication, talent, and the support of someone who believed in them. As the day ended, the boy packed his few belongings, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He said goodbye to the orphanage, the place that had been his home for so many years, and to the friends and caretakers who had shaped his life. There was sadness, of course, but also a sense of anticipation for the journey ahead. The piano, always his companion, had been the key to this moment, a silent partner in his growth and success. He took one last look at the familiar walls, then turned toward the future, ready to embrace the opportunities and challenges that awaited him in his new life with the CEO. The boy stepped into a world that was entirely new to him, a world full of unfamiliar spaces, voices, and routines. The CEO had prepared a room for him in a large, bright house, far different from the cozy but worn walls of the orphanage. The furniture was polished and grand, and the piano in the music room gleamed under the lights, far superior to the old instrument he had practiced on for years. At first, the boy felt a mix of awe and nervousness. Everything was bigger, brighter, and more complicated than he had imagined. He walked slowly through the hallways, taking in the new sights and sounds, and felt a strange combination of excitement and fear. He realized that this was not just a change in his surroundings. It was a shift in his life, a journey into a future that had once seemed impossible. The CEO welcomed him warmly, offering guidance and reassurance. He introduced the boy to the house staff and explained the routines that would help him adjust to his new life. The boy listened attentively, trying to absorb everything, but he also felt a little overwhelmed. He missed the familiarity of the orphanage, the voices of his friends, and the comfort of knowing every corner of his old home. Still, he understood that this was a unique opportunity, one that could shape his life in ways he had only dreamed about. He promised himself that he would make the most of it, not just for himself, but for the music that had brought him here and for the people who believed in him. In the first days, the boy explored the house and the piano room. The instrument in front of him was unlike anything he had ever played. The keys were smooth, the sound rich and full, and the room had perfect acoustics. He ran his fingers over the keys, feeling the difference from the old piano, and experimented with familiar melodies. The sound filled the room in a way he had never experienced, and he realized that the piano could now become an even more powerful companion. Every note resonated deeply, carrying the potential to express feelings and stories that had once been locked inside him. The boy felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would dedicate himself to music, to learning, and to growing in this new environment. The CEO took an active interest in the boy's music. He arranged for private lessons with a skilled instructor who could guide him in technique, theory, and performance. The boy absorbed every lesson with enthusiasm, eager to improve and expand his abilities. He learned new scales, practiced complex compositions, and explored different styles of music. Each day was filled with progress, discovery, and the thrill of mastering something new. The CEO watched with pride as the boy developed not only his skill but also his confidence. He recognized that the boy's talent had been hidden for too long, and now it was flourishing in an environment that nurtured his potential. Outside the music room, the boy began to adapt to life in a large household. He learned new routines, discovered hobbies beyond music, and slowly became comfortable with the people around him. The CEO encouraged him to explore his interests, to ask questions, and to express himself in every way possible. At first, the boy was shy, still carrying the reserved nature from his time at the orphanage. But the warmth and patience of the CEO, combined with the supportive staff, helped him feel at ease. He began to engage in conversations, share his thoughts, and even offer advice on small decisions in the household. The boy realized that this was a life where his voice mattered, where his actions and choices could have an impact. As the weeks passed, the boy's dedication to music deepened. He practiced for hours, experimenting with new compositions and perfecting old ones. His fingers moved with precision and emotion, producing melodies that conveyed the experiences, joys, and challenges of his life. He played with confidence, understanding that each performance was an opportunity to share a part of himself with others. The CEO attended many of these sessions, offering guidance, encouragement, and honest feedback. The boy appreciated the support, realizing that he had not only gained a home but also a mentor who believed in his potential and was invested in his growth. The boy also began to interact more with the world outside the house. The CEO arranged visits to concerts, music schools, and cultural events where the boy could observe and learn from others. Each experience broadened his understanding of music and the possibilities it offered. He met other musicians, exchanged ideas, and gained inspiration from performances that challenged his perception of what music could be. These experiences were thrilling but also intimidating. At times, the boy felt unsure of himself, questioning whether he belonged in this new world. But each challenge he faced strengthened his determination and resolve. He knew that growth required courage, practice, and the willingness to step beyond comfort zones. The boy's relationship with the CEO also grew stronger. They shared discussions about life, dreams, and aspirations. The CEO encouraged the boy to think critically, to reflect on his experiences, and to set goals for the future. These conversations were sometimes serious, sometimes lighthearted, but always filled with care and understanding. The boy learned that success was not just about talent. It was about perseverance, character, and the choices one made in the face of challenges. The CEO became not only a guardian but also a guide, helping the boy navigate a world that was vast, complex, and full of opportunities. As months passed, The boy's skill on the piano became extraordinary. He was invited to perform at small gatherings, and his music touched the hearts of everyone who listened. People were amazed at the depth of emotion and technical skill he possessed, considering his age and the limited resources he had had before. Each performance was a testament to his dedication, the hours of practice, and the journey from a quiet, unnoticed boy in an orphanage to a confident, accomplished musician. Yet, despite his growing success, the boy remained humble and focused. He remembered the lessons from the orphanage, the importance of perseverance, kindness, and respect, and carried them into his new life. The boy also found ways to give back. He occasionally visited the orphanage, bringing encouragement and sharing his experiences. He spoke to the children about dedication, hope, and believing in oneself. He showed them that talent and hard work could change lives, inspiring others to pursue their passions despite challenges. The visits were emotional, a reminder of where he had come from and the journey he had undertaken. The boy realized that while his life had changed dramatically, he could still make a positive impact on others, carrying the lessons of compassion and empathy with him. Over time, the boy began to dream even bigger. He imagined composing his own music, performing in grand halls, and inspiring audiences with his stories and melodies. The possibilities seemed endless, and the boy embraced them with excitement and determination. He knew that the journey would not always be easy, that challenges and doubts would arise, but he also understood that his talent, courage, and perseverance would guide him through. Each day was an opportunity to learn, grow, and create, and he approached it with a sense of purpose and gratitude. In this new life, the boy thrived not just as a musician but as a young person discovering the world around him. He formed friendships, explored interests, and developed a sense of independence and responsibility. The CEO continued to support him, providing guidance, mentorship, and encouragement while allowing the boy the space to make choices and learn from experiences. The boy realized that the greatest gift he had received was not just the piano, or the house, or the opportunities, but the belief that someone had in him, and the confidence to believe in himself. The journey from a quiet, overlooked child to a confident, talented musician was marked by growth, perseverance, and human connection. The boy understood that talent alone was not enough. It was passion, dedication, and the courage to take risks that had led him to this point. He embraced his new life fully, balancing his love for music with the joys of exploration, friendship, and personal growth. Every note he played, every melody he created, was a reflection of his journey, a testament to the power of hope, determination, and the belief that life could change in ways he had once only dreamed of. Years later, when the boy looked back at the moment the CEO had challenged the children at the orphanage, he realized how a simple joke had become a life-changing opportunity. The piano had been his constant companion, guiding him through loneliness, inspiring his growth, and opening doors to a future he could now fully embrace. The boy's story became one of inspiration, proof that talent, combined with perseverance, courage, and human support, could transform lives in unexpected and remarkable ways. And through it all, the music remained at the center of his life, a language that connected him to the world, a reflection of his heart, and a reminder of the journey that had brought him to a place of hope, fulfillment, and endless possibility.